World War I, also called the Great War, began in 1914. Involved in Europe, the major powers were bound by complex alliances, creating a web of obligations that would pull nations into the conflict.
With tensions rising, the alliances began to mobilize, setting the stage for the first major conflict of the 20th century.
As the mobilization began, the first battles erupted, marking the beginning of a brutal and unrelenting war that would devastate Europe. With trench warfare now entrenched, soldiers found themselves in a brutal and stagnant war, fighting for inches of land. As the generals planned their next moves, the war intensified, with strategies becoming more desperate as both sides tried to gain the upper hand.
As the battle raged on, neither side could gain a decisive advantage, resulting in a brutal and relentless stalemate.
The war, though relentless, began to wear down both sides, as soldiers faced staggering casualties and exhaustion. As the war dragged on, both sides began to fortify their positions, leading to a deadly stalemate in the trenches. As months turned into years, the war became a brutal test of endurance, with soldiers trapped in the unrelenting horrors of trench warfare. In the trenches, the soldiers faced not only the enemy, but also their own fear, as every moment could be their last. The battlefield became a grim landscape of destruction, with soldiers advancing through shell craters and over the bodies of the fallen. In the trenches, soldiers were often trapped between the relentless attacks and the silent dread of waiting for their turn to fight. In the chaos of battle, each soldier's survival depended on the sharpness of their focus. As they fought amidst the chaos, soldiers fought with a sense of urgency, racing through the battlefield to capture key positions. In the midst of the brutality, soldiers clung to small pieces of home, their only connection to a world far away from the trenches. As the war progressed, it drew in more nations, with the conflict reaching new territories and involving armies from across the globe. As the war raged on, international coalitions were formed, uniting soldiers from across the world against a common enemy.
As the front lines expanded, soldiers fought with renewed urgency, facing both their own fears and the enemy's fire.
As the war spread across cities and towns, soldiers found themselves not only fighting the enemy, but also the devastation left in their wake. As the enemy forces advanced, the soldiers faced the overwhelming prospect of a massive confrontation that would shape the course of the war. In the face of overwhelming odds, the soldiers clung to the ideals and symbols of their countries, using them as beacons of hope and strength. As the conflict reached its peak, the intensity of battle grew, with soldiers and tanks charging forward, fighting for every inch of ground. As the battle raged on, the soldiers found themselves entrenched in a cycle of relentless assault and desperate defense. The tide of the war began to shift as key battles were won, and new strategies emerged, slowly. With each passing moment, the soldiers faced the harsh reality of their circumstances, their resolve hardening as the battle reached its critical point. As the sun rose, the soldiers surged forward, their charge marking a pivotal moment in the battle that would define the course of the war. In the heat of battle, every action, no matter how small, could change the course of the fight. The soldiers pressed on through the trenches, each step forward a battle in itself, as they moved closer to the enemy lines. In the heart of the battle, soldiers faced moments of pure fear, yet their training and resolve pushed them forward. With unwavering courage, the soldiers pushed forward, determined to break through the enemy's defenses and claim victory. As the sun rose, the soldiers surveyed the battlefield, the cost of victory heavy on their hearts. As the war reached its climax, the final assault began. Soldiers, battle-worn but determined, stood at the Every moment counted now. As the soldiers prepared for their final push, each adjustment to their gear was a testament to lives. With the first rays of sunlight breaking through the smoke, the soldiers charged forward, their hearts set on victory. In the heat of battle, moments of humanity still emerged. The bond between soldiers, their willingness to sacrifice. The soldiers pressed forward, undeterred by the barrage of fire surrounding them. Their unity, purpose, and sheer will were the only. The battle weighed heavily on the soldiers, each step forward taking a toll. but their resolve remained unbroken. Despite the overwhelming obstacles, the soldiers pressed on, their resolve unwavering. Each step up the hill. As the soldiers neared their final objective, the enemy's defenses crumbled. The end of the battle was in sight. With the final assault complete, the battlefield fell silent, save for the sounds of the soldiers tending to their wounded comrades. In the silence that followed the battle, some soldiers turned to writing to process the events, capturing the princess. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the soldiers sat together in silence, their bond forged in battle. In the face of overwhelming loss, the soldiers found strength in each other, offering silent support and comfort in their darkest moments. As the battlefield lay in silence, the soldiers found themselves surrounded by the consequences of war. Amidst the wreckage and loss, soldiers found solace in memories of home. The photograph became a reminder of who they were. As the soldiers walked away from the battlefield, their faces marked by exhaustion and loss, they knew that the true cause. As the soldiers walked away, one last glance at the battlefield was all they needed. They had survived. With the battle now behind them, the soldiers walked towards a new day. Though scarred by the paroxysms, the war had taken its toll, but now, in the light of a new day, there was a flicker of hope. The soldiers walked toward the horizon, each step a reminder that the true journey had only just begun. The horizon ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, there was a sense of peace.
For the soldiers, the dawn symbolized more than just the end of a battle. It was a sign of resilience, the promise.
The soldiers marched forward together, knowing the path ahead was uncertain. But they walked with fausse mercies. In that brief moment, the soldier found solace in the simplicity of nature. As they marched on, the soldiers knew that the path ahead was uncertain. But through the dense forest they marched, the air heavy with both uncertainty and possibility. The soldiers continued their march through the dense forest, each step an effort, a reminder of the. As they moved deeper into the forest, the soldiers pressed on. The sunlight pierced through the thick trees. The soldier knew the journey ahead would not be easy. The uncertainty of the forest mirrored the uncertainty. Crossing the stream, the soldiers paused for a brief moment, allowing the flow of water to remind them that time. As the soldiers marched through the thinning forest, the path ahead seemed clearer, but uncertainty still loomed. The soldiers stepped into the light, their path now clearer. The forest was behind them, and as the soldiers continued their march into the unknown, they knew that each step forward was a step towards the future. The battlefield lay silent now, the echoes of war replaced by a profound stillness. The soldier's hand rested on the sword, a reminder of the battles fought and the peace that had been won. Tortures. As the soldiers approached the hill, their silhouettes growing smaller against the vast landscape, they knew that this. Despite the weariness in his bones and the sweat that dripped down his face, the soldier pressed on. The soldiers crossed the barren land, the setting sun casting long shadows behind them. As the soldiers ascended the hill, they knew the journey was nearing its end. The weight of the climb was heavy, almost breath. At the top of the hill, the soldiers stood together, looking out over the land they had fought to reclaim. As the soldiers walked away from the hill, their journey was far from over. The soldiers walked into the setting sun, the last remnants of the battle fading behind them. The road inclined. The soldier's hand rested on the sword, now a symbol of the peace he had fought for. The battles of the past had shared. The soldiers marched on, the land ahead vast and open, symbolizing their journey into the future. For the soldier, this moment was not just a mark of victory, but of respect for those who had fought and fought beside him. As the soldier gazed across the peaceful land, he knew that his sacrifice had been worth it. The war was over. As the soldiers walked into the night, the echoes of war were finally behind them. They had earned.
As the soldiers marched into the fading light, their journey continued, far beyond the battles they had fought.